Welcome to the Real Recovery Show. We air our episodes every Friday at noon. And today's episode is an interview with John Morra, who I'm very happy to be willing to join me today. How long have I known you for?
3 years now.
3 years. And so he's comes up on 2 years and
Two
two
years, two
months
months, and 20 days
and 20
exactly.
days.
Sobriety.
So we figured 222, so it's lucky. And yeah, so I knew you before you had a relapse, right?
Yes.
And it was really good to see you come back. And then you've been doing pretty well now. So, so I'm excited about this interview because you're one of those people who I feel is very introspective, and you want to understand yourself, and you're honest, and you'll come from that place. And plus, it's really cool. He plays pool, and he plays pool professionally. And how long have you been playing pool?
Professionally, almost 20 years now, but about 30 since I was 4 years old. I'm 34 now.
Wow. Wow. Did your parents play
Both of
pool?
my parents played professionally. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't actually
I
know
was
that.
born to be a pool player.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
hmm
All right. So like when other kids had like little mobiles, you had like little pool sticks and
Exactly.
that's
Pretty
cute.
much.
That's cute. All right. So he's gonna do what we usually do is start with what happened in our childhood, what it was like for little John, and
hmm
then we'll take it from there.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay.
And thank you so much for inviting me on the show, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Great to see you again.
It's good to see you too. Okay, so start.
Okay, what it was like. All right. So I was born in Scarborough, Canada. That's the east side of Toronto.
Hmm.
And I bounced around a lot as a child, from city to city. I was in Montreal, I was in North Bay, which is a little bit north of Toronto, and was back in Oshawa, which is close to Toronto. Throughout my childhood, raised by mom, had a sister, older sister, and dad and mom split up when I was pretty young, about 4 years old. And both parents were professional pool players. Um, I grew up in pool halls, basically, you could say, supporting mom and dad at different events. And, my mom actually won her first Canadian championships 6 months pregnant with me,
Wow.
surprisingly. Yeah, so I won a Canadian title
How
before I
how
even
do
came
you
out of the womb.
how do you lean over and play pool
Right,
with a baby?
right.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah. So I come from a lot of natural talent when it comes to pool, and I was blessed
And
with that.
willingness, obviously.
Yeah, a lot of willpower, willingness, and you know, life at home was tough because mom came from a very abusive background. She's native Indian, native Canadian,
Mm,
and she grew up on reservations. And when she was very young, she was abused by her own family. And
mm.
I'm not sure if you know the stat, but 65% of all Native Americans or Canadians, Native Indians, as a total, all in all, I mean, I think it was 65% of all Native Canadians and Americans are at some point addicted to drugs and
Yeah,
alcohol.
yeah. I did
So,
actually
yeah,
interview some people
more than
about,
half,
yeah.
and that's very
It's
bad
part
if
of
you
the
think about the
culture.
numbers. Can you imagine
Yeah.
65% of the American population being drug addicts and
Well,
alcoholics?
these are people that they even admit, like that there's even
Right. So,
anything, yeah.
you know, Indian reservations just don't have the support, the education, the resources, and there's a lot of incest, addiction, alcoholism, rape, you name it, molestation. It's just bad.
Mm.
And so mom grew up in that, and from the age of 5 to 14, she was abused by her own family, and she started playing pool. She's from Manitoba, and she started playing pool in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Midwestern Canada. And at the time, she just did it as an escape from life at home, and she was very naturally gifted with that. And she ended up marrying one of the owners of the pool hall, who was 36 years old at the time, and she was only 16.
Mm.
She married him to get away from her life, from her abusive family. And I think about a year or two later, they moved to Vancouver, British Columbia, and actually her husband's partner at the time um, moved here to Las Vegas
Hmm.
and opened the Q Club.
How interesting.
He just passed away
How
recently.
interesting.
Henry, yeah, really good guy. And sometimes I talk to him and be like, "Yeah, what was Wally like? That was my sister's father. We have
Hmm.
different fathers." He was like, "That guy was just a piece of crap, like
Hmm.
terrible." And we went our separate ways. He went to Vancouver. I came to Vegas, and he just had nothing good to say about the guy.
Hmm.
And they went out to Vancouver. My mom, her husband, my sister. She's 3 years older than I am. I wasn't born yet, and they went out there, and he started doing construction out there, and life was pretty good from what she told me. And then all of a sudden, he got hooked on heroin. My mom pretty much emptied out their joint bank account, and she moved to Toronto,
Hmm.
and she took her daughter, my sister, and they went out there, and they went to Toronto because Toronto was booming. That was the number one city for pool at the time.
Hmm.
And so she went there to pursue her career. That's when she met my father. And not long after that, she was pregnant with me.
What an adventure.
Yeah. And her ex-husband ended up chasing her out there, trying to get back with her. And I think my mom said, obviously she didn't get back with him, but eventually he ended up in jail out there in Toronto. And that was the last time they ever heard from him. And that was, 35 years ago or
Wow,
so.
that must have been hard on your sister.
Yeah, she's never met her father. So, well, she doesn't remember her father.
Right, from when she
Anyway,
was that
yeah.
young.
So, my mom met my dad. They had me. And, yeah, so my mom was mistreated, by obviously she had a lot of abuse, a lot of rape, molestation. It was just
It does lower your tolerance.
really bad at
Yeah, I
home.
mean, it raises your tolerance, I should say,
My mom
to all
hated
kinds of bad
hated
behavior.
men, hated men. And she got into from toxic relationship to another. And growing up, I just remember her being really abusive with my dad, with any boyfriend she had. It didn't matter who it was. And, the relationships always ended. Then we'd move to another city.
That must have been hard for
Yeah.
you growing up to not have like a really healthy role model
Yeah.
for like as a male figure, but also your mom's narrative of men and seeing that, and then her wanting you not to be maybe like them. And that must have been a lot to carry,
Yeah.
to unpack.
Yeah. I love my dad so much. I hated not seeing him.
Mm.
And I hated, the abuse between them two. Um, and I just hated having a stepdad, a
Mm.
different stepdad, like every few months or
Right.
every year, and moving to new cities.
Yeah.
And there was just no stability.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of arguing and just a lot of toxicity. And mom was abusive with my sister and I as well. Not so much physically, more verbally. And she just really wasn't present. She wasn't there because she was very sick.
Yeah.
She's definitely one of us.
Yeah.
She's had her struggles with addiction,
Even just PTSD alone, even
her
if somebody doesn't
PTSD. Yes.
even if somebody doesn't ever
Mhm.
pick up a drink or anything, just PTSD can make you wall up and dissociate and, have coping skills of keeping everybody at an arm's distance and,
Yeah.
yeah, pushing
Yeah.
people away with hyperreactivity and
Yeah.
starting up things and reading into things.
Yes.
PTSD is nasty on its own.
Yes. And looking back then when I was a kid, you don't understand these things. So I just grew up hating her but loving her. It was just a love-hate relationship. And it wasn't until I started coming to meetings and groups that I realized,
Where that was
what
coming
what
from.
yeah, what abuse can do to somebody, and
Yeah.
and why it's a big reason that people drink and use,
Yeah.
to numb those feelings. And that's what she always did. So, life at home was very difficult for my sister and I. And my mom just she had a lot of bad luck in her life. From being a kid that was abused from the age of 5 to 14, raped, abused, and the PTSD, the trauma, and her never knowing never getting real help to deal with it. Like she saw, she's seen psychiatrists, she's been to some therapy, but she never really stuck with it, never got on the proper medication, and she just self-medicated with drugs and alcohol for
She's
years and
still
years.
alive?
She's still alive. We have a really good relationship today. She's bipolar, and she's finally been on the right medication now for about 5 years.
Mm.
And if you met her today, you would
It's
not
not the
know.
same.
You would
Yeah.
not know that any of that ever happened to her. She's done an amazing job healing
That's
as a
wonderful.
woman, and
And
yeah,
also with
we have
you
a
being in recovery,
yeah,
that contributes greatly to forgiveness and to bridging that gap
yeah,
in your relationship. So it
absolutely.
does take two.
Yeah, we have a really strong relationship, her and
That's
I.
wonderful to hear.
We never gave up on each other.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And your dad, what ended up happening?
My dad and I have a good relationship as well. I'll get to him in a minute, but yeah, life at home was just really tough. I grew up with mom, and I wanted to just get away from her because it was just so bad, you know.
Mm,
But my dad was always worried about what would happen if he, took me from her,
mm,
and so basically I just stayed with her and
mm.
bounced from school to school, to city, and at this time I think maybe I was 10 years old when I started to play pool at the and by the way, like during this whole time of her raising us, she was still playing pool competitively and still the best female player in Canada and one of the best in the world, even through all her struggles. Like she
Mm,
was just so strong.
mm.
And I'd go to tournaments with her, go to tournaments with dad, and I was born around great pool,
That's
like the
awesome.
best high level pool you could
But
be
I mean, the
around,
focus that's involved in playing
Yeah,
pool is meditational and helpful. And when somebody has
yeah,
that kind of chaos anyway, to focus on getting better and better
yeah,
at something,
right.
wasn't it like an outlet?
Absolutely. For
Yeah.
her, for me, for my dad, it's still an outlet for me. And they don't play anymore, just I do. And yeah, so when I was about 4 or 5 years old, I started. That was my earliest memories of playing pool.
Mm,
And obviously, I was 4 or 5 years old. You're like really short,
right.
so I would carry around a milk crate,
Oh,
and that's how I would shoot balls on a pool table.
wow.
And it wasn't until I was about 10 where I was actually tall enough to play on my own.
Wow.
Yeah, but between 4 and 10, I watched the best players in Canada compete and would just love cheering on mom and dad at tournaments. And my sister played a little bit as well, but she wasn't nearly competitive or loved it like I did. And when I was about 10 is when I started to compete quite a bit. We had just moved back to near Toronto from Montreal, and I was tall enough to actually play pool on my own now, and I just knew what to do. It was like
Mm.
a long break from playing pool because I didn't really play much between 4 and 10. But when I did finally start playing and I was tall enough, I just knew what to do with the pool cue. I just picked it up, and it
Did you ever
was a
have,
natural
and
talent.
this may be just indicative of somebody who watched a little bit too much TV, but did you ever have it where you'd go and you'd have people and they're betting on, and then they see you come in and you're like, yeah, I'll play with you. And then they're like, psst, should we take this kid's money? And then you just go
Yeah,
and you show up and you're like, here's your crate, or not
right,
even
right.
that. You just go and you go, no, I could play,
Yeah,
and then you like wipe the floor
right.
with
The
them.
hustle, yeah. I've
Did
done
you
a
ever do
little bit
that?
of that, yeah, and that's like the number one question people always ask me, like, so do you hustle and
Did
this
you?
and that.
Yeah. When
I've
people
done a
didn't know
little
what
bit
to
of it,
expect.
but it's never really been my thing. Like,
Mm,
I've just always loved playing pool
yeah.
for the enjoyment.
I just love when people
Yeah,
underestimate somebody.
yeah, and I never really got off too much on hustling people,
Mm,
like helpless, not helpless, I shouldn't say
yeah.
that, but like beginners in bars and stuff
Yeah.
that are just going there for fun. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I don't really like taking advantage of those
I guess in
types of
my
players and
imagination,
people.
it was some egoic, arrogant person that was all like, yeah, step up.
Yeah, I've definitely had that. It's just I played so much pool, I don't even remember a
Yeah.
lot of times. But
So when did you start self-medicating with
um,
alcohol, drugs?
well, yeah, I grew up in pool halls, and drugs and alcohol just surrounded me. You
So
know,
when did you
those are
start
just
drinking
in those
or
places. I started when I was about 13. I started smoking cigarettes when I was 13 because between 10 and 13, I started getting really good at pool, hated school. Because of not having a father around, I didn't have much self-esteem. I didn't have much confidence. I didn't have a man in my life to show me how to be a man,
Yeah.
and I didn't respect any of my stepfathers.
Yeah.
I loved my dad, and I didn't want to be around any of my stepdads. And
Did you have friends?
not many. No, I wasn't good
I didn't
at
either.
making. I had a few, but then we would move to another city,
Oh, that must have been
and I
hard.
was always the new kid.
Yeah.
So I'd get bullied in school, and I just felt like really out of place all the time. And
Me too.
yeah,
Although minus the moving, but my mind had this thing, which I think could be something similar to yours, is sure I could invest. Sure I can go and try to be friends with this person and that person and I could play the game, but why? Like for in your case, I can imagine not to project because you can tell me if I'm wrong, but that you're going to be possibly moving anyway. So what's the point of putting all this energy into trying to be friends with some of these people? Especially when if they're not even being nice. But I
yeah,
was made fun of too, and I just ended up retreating into the things that I did that gave me solace.
right,
In my own isolation, the things that I focused on.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's interesting. I've always felt like we had like a similar vibe,
Hmm.
what attracts what are at its own level. And I don't know. So hearing some of the pieces of your story that I didn't know, I was like,
Yeah,
oh, that makes sense.
right.
Mm,
Yeah, I like that we share those similarities.
yeah,
And
we'd understand each other in that way.
yeah, so from 10 to 13, like I said, I hated going to school because I had low self-esteem. I didn't
Hmm.
have many friends. I didn't know how to really communicate too well.
Hmm.
I had social anxiety, social phobia.
Yeah.
Um, but
And you fell behind in
I
school.
fell behind in school because
That's the same
I
thing
just
in
didn't
me.
want to do the
This is
work.
crazy.
I just didn't want to do the work,
Yeah.
and I was so naturally gifted at pool. When I
Mm.
picked up that pool cue at 10 years old, I just started running the tables, running out, and I just had that feeling like, wow, I want
Like, why
this.
do I
I
need
got this.
school? I could just do
Yeah,
this.
and immediately I once I started, running pool tables consistently at 10 years old, I was like, I'm gonna be world champion. Like I
Mm.
can feel it. And this is all like I fell in love with the game. And from that point I hated school.
Mm.
And I just felt like I was better than everybody at school. Like
It was a
I
nuisance. It was
yeah.
unnecessary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I go to tournaments throughout the week. I make money already at 10, 11 years old, and I'm this protege. Like everyone tipped me to be like, the next world champion. Like grown-ups that I watched playing, my whole life who would compete with mom and dad, like finally they got to see me play now. And I was the kid, like I had arrived.
But you
Yeah,
weren't a kid. You were
yeah,
10 years old, but you had experienced more life and more of an experience of, in essence, needing to be an adult, not really feeling like a kid that was
right.
in being able to be a kid with other kids.
Yeah.
And you're in an adult world with
Hmm.
smoking and drinking and playing pool
Hmm.
and going from place to place. And so it's, in essence, you're a very little adult.
Yeah, I totally missed out on my childhood,
So did I.
and
Interesting.
that's why I could not relate to kids.
Hmm.
I didn't
No.
like being around kids.
I always said I'm an old soul. I
Yeah,
would say all the time because
yeah,
I couldn't explain why I was just not relating to being
and I
able
look
to.
back on it now, and I'm like, damn, I wish I would have got to have fun with those
Yeah.
kids, and I wish I didn't play so much pool.
Mm.
I wish I would have done a little bit more in school and built, a few more relationships in school because,
You would
I
have
have
learned those
friends.
skills.
I still have friends from school, but like they've maintained their relationships with their friends from childhood. I don't have any
Yeah.
maintained relationships
No.
from childhood, from school or anything.
You
Pool
know,
just consumed my
I
life.
have had this thought because it is still not natural. Like I'm a very friendly person. What do you say? I'm friendly, right?
Absolutely.
And but yet making friends and having friends that I go and do normal friend type stuff with, what has to happen for me to like go and just do things with people is stupid. Like I just don't have that natural program. I don't have the experience of having done that through my childhood to build a foundation of like my mind does the same thing at my age now that it did then and say, for what? What is it for? It's going to get in the way of me accomplishing the things I want to
Right.
accomplish. And like it has the same attitude about it,
Yeah.
because it never built that foundation. But I will also say this, that because somebody said this to me, and it was one of the most spiritually impactful thoughts. They said, if you didn't know what happened in your childhood that contributed to the things that you love about yourself today, what would you really change? I became somebody who was driven. You became somebody who was
Yeah.
driven. I became somebody who was passionate and focused on the things that I loved and I wanted to do. And interestingly enough, what I'm doing right now is what I said I wanted to do when I was a little girl.
Uh,
And you know, I became capable of being alone. I became capable of being able to focus on things in such a way that I don't get distracted by a whole bunch of other things, except dating sometimes, but I'm
yeah.
working on that.
Uh,
And so what would I change? I care deeply, and I understand the pain and suffering that people have gone through, because I have gone through so much of crazy my own stuff in my own life, but I sought to understand. I spent a lot of time seeking to understand when maybe other people were just watching TV and hanging out, which is
right.
good, right? So maybe I don't have some of the other skills, but what would I really want to change about who I am today? And what would I want to change about my past if I knew that it contributed to something maybe that I feel is a strength today?
Right.
And like, you have all these strengths,
Yeah.
right? So some of it came from hardship,
Right.
right? So what would you change? Really,
Yeah.
if you knew that maybe you wouldn't have ended up experiencing
Yeah.
yourself and some of the things that you
Yeah.
experienced the way you
I
do.
think it's just a character defect to think, I wish I wouldn't have done this. It's just a character defect to
Yeah,
regret things. Like everything happens for a reason and it'll led us to where we are now. And I'm
yeah,
living my best life now. I
yeah.
am
That's awesome.
being in recovery.
Mm,
And all of that had to happen
yeah,
to bring me to this point.
I agree.
And yeah, so I started smoking when I was 13 because I was playing pool every day till 1, 2, 3, 4 in the morning
Mm.
and going to school the next day because my mom would make sure I went to school.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
She knew I was getting good at pool, but she knew I needed to be in school. She knew I needed an education. And I just fell behind, you know, for years and years and years
Yeah,
because I was up late.
me too.
I was up late. I
To like
was,
2 or 3 in the morning,
yeah. And then
and
I'd go
then
to
try to go
school,
to school with no sleep,
no
and then you
sleep.
can't
Yeah.
focus, and you're very self-aware, and your brain's just not
Yeah.
working,
Hmm.
right? And then it's all, school is cumulative. So whatever they taught yesterday and the day before that I might have missed, either because I was physically was absent or mentally was absent,
Hmm.
I don't know enough to know what to do to understand today.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly. That was totally me. And I
yeah,
felt I was very tired at school all the time, behind, felt like a failure.
yeah.
And
It doesn't help your self-esteem.
and it was bad for my
I thought I was
self-esteem
stupid
because
because I couldn't understand stuff.
yeah, everyone at school was well rested, having fun, doing this, laughing, and I just felt like an outcast. And it was hurting my relationships in school. It was hurting everything.
Plus,
And
also in recovery, we learn halt, like don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, tired. That was my childhood. Like I was hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So can you imagine if today I have to watch to not be in that state of mind because I might take things a little bit personally or not come from a spiritual place? My entire childhood was I was walking around with my skin on inside out, with
yeah,
a foggy head and
yeah,
emotional and really low self-esteem, and like
yes,
no clue how to like join in. And so nobody even had to do anything past a certain point, even though I did have child abuse and alcoholism in my childhood. I was on a roll. Like the way I was interacting with the world was starving me spiritually, and I was no it was like a snowball going down a hill,
yeah.
you know?
That was exactly my experience, and I
That's so
hated being
interesting.
at school from the age of 10. If I could have never went to school another day, I would have been the happiest
Did
kid.
you stay in or did you end up
I dropped
leaving?
out in my senior year because I had just finished second place in a professional event with grown men, best players in the world, and I was behind on credits in high school. And when I finished second in that event, my mom was like, "You can go your own way now. You could, if you want to quit and drop out, go ahead, because you're behind. And if even if you complete your senior year, you're gonna have to
Right.
go back next year to catch up. So it just would have derailed my progress in pool, and I was, one of the best players in the world already at 17.
That's amazing.
But between 13 and 17 is when my addiction started. And it started with smoking cigarettes. And occasionally I would drink with friends. And I drank alcoholically right away because I hated the way I felt.
Yeah.
I did not feel good. The only time I felt good was at the pool hall
Yeah.
because I was playing.
In your
I was the
element.
best player. I was in my element. Yeah.
And your self-esteem was without question.
Yeah.
There
was
you were,
always winning.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, I was always winning, and everyone loved me. They knew my mom, they knew my dad, and everyone had my back. And
You felt safe.
yeah, I felt safe, and I was winning most of the time, but I was losing as well. Like
Yeah.
you win and lose at anything that you compete at. So
Yeah.
I hated life outside of the pool hall, the pool world, and when I did lose at pool,
Then you didn't like inside either.
it was
Wow.
it was losing at pool was, even now, is still like the end of the world for me.
Wow.
I don't deal with losing very well
Because
because
you're
it's my whole identity.
identified. Yeah, you're so
Pool's my
identified
whole
with it
identity.
being your safe place,
I
your
felt
good
like
place.
nothing outside of pool. So when I lose at pool, I feel like, what do I have
That's
now?
so powerful.
What do I have now in life? Like, now that I can't win at this, and I'm one of the best at this.
Wow.
So for
That's
years,
crazy.
yeah, and from 13 to 17, I'd smoke cigarettes, I'd drink once in a while, smoke a bit of pot. I was always scared of hard drugs. A lot of my friends in school at the time were doing ecstasy, and I was like, no, I'm good. I don't want any of that. And I was like, I'm never putting anything up my nose, like no chance. And from 13 to 17, I was always hiding my cigarettes, my booze. Not really the
How would you
alcohol.
have to hide that? Don't a lot of people smoke cigarettes?
Right,
and
but I was just
alcohol?
so ashamed because I hated that I did it, but I needed something
Because you
to
knew
take
why
the
you did
pressure
it.
off.
Is
Yeah,
that what it was?
yeah, and I needed something to take the pressure off because I was playing pool, going to school, no sleep. Like the cigarettes just gave me such a good release and stimulant. Like, oh, and I just felt so like okay with them. So, but I always had the feeling in the back of my mind, like, you can't be doing this. You have to quit. But the addiction was just so strong already. I was like, I can't quit. And I tried so many times. I can't tell you how many times I threw out a pack of cigarettes and then just bought one the next day
Yeah.
after
I would
smoking
say
one.
quitting smoking was one of the harder addictions to quit
Yeah,
because it
my
was so
toughest.
interwoven in my life every day.
It's always been my toughest because physically, your body just wants it, needs it, and it just lasts for days until it finally
Yeah,
gets
we're
out
going
of
to
your
do an
system.
episode on that eventually.
Yeah.
For sure.
And,
Okay, at this point, we're going to take a quick break so
Okay.
we can go to commercial. And if you hear a little huffy puffiness, it's because, oh, look,
Mhm.
my dog. There you go. I don't even know if you can see him, but anyway,
Security guard.
he's saying, there you go. Here's a paw. Do you see the paw? Whatever. We're going to go to break and we'll see you in a little bit. Thank you. The meeting space is a facility with over 100 weekly recovery meetings for addiction from alcohol, drugs, sex, food, gambling, codependency, and PTSD. When someone is scared to go to their first meeting, we walk them through the process, ask them and answer questions to assuage their concerns. Many are court-ordered to attend, and we provide free court papers and teach them the process. Our glass-enclosed, soundproof children's playroom enables parents to be in a meeting while watching their children. We have healing workshops, craft fairs, and special authors who come to teach and sit with our fellowships. During COVID, we were declared an essential business by the County Commissioner's Office. We were kept open so that we can continue our daily work with traumatized chronic relapsers and those who would have used alcohol or drugs in isolation. Local businesses rent our space as well to financially help with this mission, and they get to have a great location for their business meeting or training. The recovery store in the center of our facility
provides literature, clothing, medallions, and custom gifts to encourage, aid in, and celebrate a person's recovery from alcohol, drugs, PTSD, or unhealthy behaviors. Both the recovery store and the meeting space are open every day, including holidays. Saving lives, educating the community, reducing social stigma, providing a safe place for people to heal. Our nonprofit is supported entirely by donations by people like you who want everyone to have a place to go to heal.
Welcome back to the Real Recovery Show. We're joined here with Bear and John Morra. This has been a very, very, very good conversation, very deep and insightful. Please remember, though, that the opinions expressed here are strictly those of the people who gave them, and they do not represent any 12-step program or are meant to replace your own intuition or professional medical advice. And if you want to see any of our episodes or listen to our podcast, you can go to themeetingspace.com. You can click on The Real Recovery Show, and you can see all of our episodes posted there. You can go to YouTube and look up The Real Recovery Show. And you can go to Facebook, Amazon Fire TV. You can listen on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And right now we're in a transition of moving all of it under just the name The Real Recovery Show off of the PHLV radio app. So we're, I don't know by the time you heard this or saw this, if we'd already done it yet. So check on that. But yeah, if you're interested in being on a show, you can write to us on at the contact form or the intake form on themeetingspace.com. Okay, so now we're back, and we are what we were doing. We were talking about now there's smoking, alcohol, drugs, and so how old were you? So this went on for a long time, right?
Yeah, started at 13 and just got progressively worse, like it always does.
Did you try to stop at any point?
I tried, I just couldn't, because it made me feel so good. You know, it was the only relief I had. And like I said, I was
Did it affect
not,
your pool playing?
it did, but I was still so talented that I got away with it. And I would
So then
still
you
win.
thought it didn't affect it then.
Yeah, I would still win. I was blessed with so much natural talent at pool because mom and dad were champions, that I got away with my smoking, my drinking. I'd show up to tournaments hungover and still win. And my ego got really big really fast because I got away with doing all of that. And, you know, like I said, at school, I was low self-esteem, no confidence. In the pool world, I was huge ego. So I was like already living a double life. And, you know, when I'd lose that pool, it was the end of the world, like I said. And just nothing made sense if I lost that pool. So that was.
How are you in like outside in other parts of the world? Like were you dating people and having relationships?
I was terrified. I had no confidence like speaking to girls. I wasn't dating.
Even when you drank or did drugs?
No, I was just I didn't know how to communicate. I wasn't good at
Surely girls
communicating.
came up to you while you were playing pool.
A few, yeah, a little.
Threw their panties on the table.
Yeah, here and there.
Instead.
Here and there, yeah. Not as many times as I wish that it would happen. Yeah, I just wasn't good at communicating, honestly. I was scared. I was really jacked up inside. Because I didn't learn well at school. I was always tired, social anxiety, social phobia. Mom was verbally abusive. Dad wasn't around much. My confidence was low.
Yeah.
And pool was the only thing
My confidence
that
was
made
low
me feel
too.
good
I
about
had a lot
myself.
of really shameful headspace tapes. I just like, you know, things like I just felt like I didn't have the social skills, but I also had a lot of shame about my shame. I had a lot of shame about my mental and emotional status. Like I knew I wasn't stable, and I was afraid that, and I felt really rejected. So I was afraid that if I got too close to anybody, that they would find out that I'm unlovable. And so to me, I tried to control that. But when you try to control how close people are to you, you end up not really having anybody close to you.
Right.
And then you end up feeling alone, even if everybody's telling you that they love you.
Right.
Because they don't know you.
Right.
So how could you love somebody you don't know?
Yeah.
And if you don't love yourself, how could you receive it all the way in? And so I can imagine that your relationships were affected, or trying to have any.
I just didn't know how to do life. I knew how to play pool at a very high level, and that was it. And I was already an addict, an alcoholic, and I knew I had a problem. I just was in denial about it and didn't know how to get help. And my drinking got really bad when I started going to the Philippines. I started going there for major pool tournaments. Philippines is a hot spot for pool.
Oh, interesting.
If you had to pick the best pool playing country in the world, it's probably the Philippines.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah, and I had a lot of fun out there.
It's kind of a shame that this episode isn't on PHLV. I should tell them. But yeah.
So I went out there for tournaments, and the drinking, the women, it just got so out of control. My alcoholism just like skyrocketed. And I was dating a girl out there for about 2-3 years. Finally came, and that was that was like the first real love I had, but cheated on her, was dishonest. She had a daughter, so she would always go home at night to her daughter, and I was an alcoholic, so I was
stay
out with friends, stay out, and cheating on her constantly. And I just remember feeling so bad about it, because to the core, like deep down, like I know what's wrong and right, and I know I'm a good person. I just can't help myself because I'm an alcoholic, and I make terrible decisions, and I make selfish decisions. I just want to feel good. I'm addicted to feeling good, because my whole life I never felt good.
Yeah.
So drugs and alcohol gave me, and sex gave me that feeling to numb those bad feelings, and I chased them for years and years and years. And I still chase them sometimes, just not with drugs and alcohol, but now I have the ability to recognize when I'm indulging.
So what were your drugs of choice other than alcohol and cigarettes?
It started out with alcohol, and then I moved back to Toronto from the Philippines, left that girl for another girl back in Toronto, and we were together 5 years. And at the time, I was hanging out a lot with a friend back home, and he had amazing MDMA, ecstasy, and I had never tried it. It was always offered to me in school, and I was like, no, I'm not taking pills, I'm not doing cocaine. And I was like, screw it. Just tried it one night, and we went out downtown Toronto. Toronto has a really good house music scene. I love house music, like dance music, raves, underground, that whole scene. And so I took some of that and fell in love with MDMA and fell in love with house music, and just did it for months and months.
It's very
and months.
trance setting. Yeah.
It just made me feel so good. I was just in love with myself, with everyone, the music, and just felt so good. And I just couldn't stop doing it because it felt so great. I fell in love with it. And I met a girl who was partying like I was, but on an even higher level, and she was really bad into cocaine. And I don't know how, I don't know why or how. I guess I was just so lost in the drugs at the time. I'll back up a little bit. I was in the Philippines, and I was struggling so bad with alcohol and cheating on my girlfriend over there. I felt so bad about myself. I'd wake up hungover, but like shame, guilt, remorse. And my friend could just see that I was suffering out there, and he gave me this book because he couldn't read English. He's Filipino, and it was an English book on Jesus. And I was desperate. I didn't want to read a book on Jesus, but I was so desperate. When I got back home to Toronto, I read this book from cover to cover. And, I really wanted God in my life, because I just messed everything up at that point. Like, I was 22. I hadn't won, no, I was about 24. I hadn't won nearly what I should have won at pool. Hadn't won a world championship. Hadn't won US Opens. Hadn't won anything. That I was an underachiever from someone who had all the potential.
So strongly. Yeah.
I felt like a failure, and I was always coming up short in these tournaments, not winning. and ruining relationships, not treating my father well, ruined the relationship with my sister. And I felt horrible. I read this book, and now I know that was God. That was my higher power leading me to that girl. And we met. She partied like I did, on a way higher level though, like every single day. I was always the binge drinker who could drink for a few days and then stop for a week and then just go really hard
And
again.
now it was on.
She could not stop for 1 minute any day. She was bad. And I was like, look, she had her own apartment, and I didn't want to live at home with Dad because I wasn't getting along with him. So basically I just was like, look, we can try to make this work somehow, but we need to stop doing drugs and drinking, or
Oh,
or
wow.
I'm going my separate way. I can't be with you. And she was like, look, yeah, I love you. I want to make things work, but I need support. I can't do this on my own. Her father had been sober like 20 years and went to groups and meetings, so that's what she wanted to start doing. And she's like, come with me for support. And at this time, I had no idea with what this recovery was about.
Right.
And so I went with her as support,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't fully commit myself to these groups and meetings
For yourself.
for myself. I was going for her, and it was working for her. Then she'd relapse, and then it was working for her, and then she'd relapse. And I toned it down. I would drink like a glass of wine at dinner or something. But then eventually I would go back to my MDMA behind her back. And then so we were always relapsing, lying to each other, and it was really toxic. I got her pregnant. I wanted to have the baby. She didn't. So she had an abortion, and it was just a really effed up time, And eventually
How old were you at this time?
20, 24, 25. And eventually we got on the same page, and we got clean and sober together. And we had a really good network around us. And if you would have saw both of us come in, and you would have taken bets on who was going to make it in sobriety and recovery, you would have bet on me, because she was an absolute train wreck. But she had the gift of desperation, and she knew.
That's powerful.
And she knew what she was, because she had been in recovery before.
Yeah.
She went to rehab.
And her father was.
And her father. So she knew much more about recovery than I did. I had never gone to, done any of that self-appraisal.
You weren't in a position to take it as seriously.
No. And it wasn't until I started using behind her back and lying about it that I was like, you know what? Yeah, I am just as bad. I'm not an everyday user like she is, but once I start, I can't stop, and I'm lying about it, and I'm ruining my life.
I think that's one of the biggest problems we have in trying to get to a place, and getting to a place where we admit where we have a problem, is that we compare to other people. And that's what our diseased thinking does. It says, well, I'm not that bad, because if I was that bad, then I would be like that person.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah, your money would have been on me. I looked like the more level-headed one with not so many issues. I was just in denial.
Yeah. And plus you were very self-controlled.
She'd been through a lot of trauma. She'd been through a lot. And she was ready to recover, And I feel like I always attracted women that were like my mom, that Oedipus complex they talk about. I always looked for broken women because I could never fix my mom. And I always was attracted to those women.
Me too.
And
it's like, as soon as I would say, tell me about your childhood. It's like everything, every time I date, I go, tell me about your past relationships. Oh yeah, tell me about your childhood. And almost always they tell me about their father was an alcoholic, or the mother, or blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, yeah, still happening.
Yeah.
In fact, I just went on a date with somebody, and he said that he had a great childhood, and that his parents were wonderful, and he's never had anything really bad happen in his life, and he's so fortunate. And I was like I wanted to pinch him and go, oh my God, like, really? Is that really?
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Right.
Like, and then I felt so different.
Yeah.
Because that was not my story.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah. So with her, what was I here?
So then you got serious about it,
We
and
got serious.
you got serious about your recovery.
Yeah. Yeah, and with her, like a lot of people, there was red flags everywhere, when I started dating her.
Hmm.
And my father's like, "What are you doing, like with her? Like she's nuts, mental. Like she'd do 2, 3 grams of coke a day and then take GHP, the date rape drug, to go to sleep. You know?
Holy cow!
Yeah,
Oh my God,
that's how that was her. That was her,
that was her
and a
taking it
lot
down.
of crazy times in between. You know, and God bless her, she's still clean and sober today.
That's amazing.
8 years. We celebrated our first 2 years together in recovery, and the third one, we broke up. We were together about 5 years. We broke up. I had stopped, working my program, and I had a lot of defects, lying. I was still the liar, the cheater, um, living a double life, traveling the world playing pool, trying to maintain, and just wasn't doing a very good job at it. And at this time, I was also in a lot of pain from playing pool. Over the years, I had played so much pool and I became really left eye dominant when I played. So that
Hmm.
meant that I would put my cue under my left eye here and it was hurting my trap.
Oh,
So I
interesting.
ended up quitting pool. I had to quit. I was in too much pain.
Oh yeah.
And it was a really, really low point in my life. And I think I was ranked number 5 at my very best in the world at pool. And I quit and I was so sad. I was so depressed.
Can
Like
imagine.
I never, that was my identity, yeah. And I had lost it. And I felt like it was all self-inflicted
Yeah.
from the drugs and alcohol. Like I don't know why my cue kept going underneath my left eye as the years went on. I could only attribute it to like abusing my body with drugs and alcohol. And I just felt like it was all my fault. And I cried so much that day when I made the decision, like to quit. I was like
God.
sobbing, and I didn't want to get a regular job because I had never worked one in my entire life.
Wow.
So I was teaching pool, DJing, because I got into house music at that
Okay.
time. And I started playing with my opposite hand. I retaught myself how to play with my left hand
That's
so
crazy.
that I wouldn't be in pain because playing with my left, I was no longer irritating this right trap.
Mm-hmm.
Now the pressure was going over here, but now my cue is underneath my left eye and there's no more strain. So I trained myself from scratch with my left hand and I'm ranked top 25 in the world now.
That's crazy.
I'm back
Like
to
who your
yeah.
entire life shooting pool one way and then to do it, that's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
So it's given me like a new purpose. Like it took me back to being a kid when
Mm.
I was learning how to play and getting good very rapidly and enjoying the game and loving the game.
Oh, how
I
interesting.
experienced that all over again with my left hand. And it's been a really, really tough, rewarding, really, really, really,
And this time sober.
yeah, hard working like journey experience. Like it's
How
I've had to
amazing.
work so hard to bring myself back
That
up to
is
this level.
powerful. That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
and the only reason I can do it is because I'm sober
Yeah.
and
And
clean.
then also you're present for all of it. I mean, you're
Yeah,
you're going through the whole experience raw. You're facing your fears and your defeats and your excitements and like you're learning like and somebody who doesn't play pool just maybe goes and learns how to just do Christmas sober, but you're learning to do traveling and
right.
all of the things
Yeah,
that you're doing and competing
yeah.
and doing
Winning,
it with a
yeah,
whole different you know
winning and losing is it's very the swings are so up and down
yeah,
emotionally. Like
yeah,
one day I'm on top of the world, the next I
yeah.
feel
I'm a firm
like I'm
believer
not good
that
enough.
if it's hitting something really core in our identity, that's the biggest swings. Like if it's hysterical, it's historical. If it has a real energy and impact, it's because I'm identified with it.
Yeah,
So if I'm ever really upset about something, it's because it has affected the who I think I am and what I think I need to be safe. Like it's core. It may seem to be something someone says or something didn't go the way maybe I think it should, and somebody can go, "Oh, Lisa, just turn it over," and that's really cute. But what my interpretation of it is hitting some deep stuff. You know, this is, in my mind, it almost feels life or death
Yeah.
because the will to live starts to go down when I get hit with something like that.
Yeah.
My mind starts asking philosophical questions that could sound very suicidal, like what the hell is the point of all this?
Right.
Why am I even doing this?
Right.
You know, and it may not even, it may bounce off another person, you
Yeah.
know, but here you are, and pool has been part of your identity. It's been your safe place, you know, and so here you were willing to give it up,
I had
and
to.
you were, but the hunger to do that gave you the impetus, the inspiration to do it differently. But in order to do it and protect it this time, to be sober, to walk through it, and to learn the tools and to heal, like it's quite the inspiration. And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that you're sharing the story with
Thank
us.
you. Yeah, it's been an amazing journey. I love Las Vegas now
Now, how
because
old are
I've
you
been
now?
through so many ups and downs here. 34.
34.
Just turned 34 and been out here in Vegas since early 2020. And I currently don't live here anymore. I just spend time here because I lived here for those first 11 months because of COVID, and until everything started getting,
Right.
reopened and scheduled, I built a really solid foundation here.
So where do you live now?
I've been living in Toronto, but I'm basically out of my suitcase. I'm traveling nonstop. I'm going to Seattle Friday, then Texas Monday, then China, then New York, then I'm all over the map.
And you're meeting people in recovery wherever you go,
Yeah,
right?
wherever I go, I meet people in recovery. I stay connected with God. I put him first before everything.
That's beautiful.
I meditate, I pray. I I have a morning routine. One of my mentors told me, John, remember that you wake up with untreated alcoholism
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
And I make sure I tap into that power because I don't have it. I need help every day. Being an alcoholic and an addict has taught me that I need to ask for help, and it's something that I've never been good at doing because I've always been afraid of people. I've always been self-conscious. I've always had low self-esteem, and I've always had that superiority complex as well because of being
Right.
so great at pool.
Yeah.
I never wanted anyone's help. Because I was a master at the game, and that's, sometimes being blessed with too much talent can be such a curse, and it was for me. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
And, what God has given me and recovery is the humility to ask for help and just realize I can't do it alone.
That's so beautiful.
And to keep it, I have to give it away. I have to try to help someone else. That's been something that I've worked on and that I'm working on more
And you
than
know what's so
ever.
cool about it too is that it's helped me to have relationships,
Yeah.
Real relationships that I wasn't really capable of having before recovery. To be able to sincerely be honest with another person and let them in, and people that I feel like I could trust because they want my highest good, which in the world that I was circling in, I felt like a lot of people just wanted what they wanted from me, right? Everybody used everybody.
Yeah.
So it's great. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
welcome. Thank
This
you
has
for
been
having
so
me.
good.
Yes.
And thank you for
grateful for it.
joining us on the Real Recovery Show. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. All right, see you next week.
See ya.